Thank you, Mr. President. I believe that everyone, or nearly everyone, that's on the Senate floor today agrees with almost everything in this bill, except one, and that's forced taxpayer funding of abortion on demand, the taking of an innocent human life. So for a few $100,000 or even a few million, the majority is willing to force people who have religious beliefs based on science and that life in the womb is precious and human regardless of its size. We're not going to reach a bipartisan agreement. But the -B11 amendment would allow us to do that. You know, yesterday, colleagues, was the 4th of July. And we celebrate the birth of our country and the Declaration of Independence. An amazing document. Lots of you have read it many times. I just want to read you a portion. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Colleagues, I would ask you, what is the most important right? And I would tell you that the most important right, in my opinion, is the right to life. Because if you don't have the right to life, you can't exercise any other right that's been afforded to you. And the issue of our time, I believe, is human rights. And we have tragedy all over the world. We have countries, including our own, that is too quick to war. We have countries that are dictatorships that kill their own citizens. We have starvation. And in America, a courageous young woman named Lila Rose says this: the very foundation of our laws, the very foundation of our country, the very question of our greatness depends on how we treat the weakest. It depends upon how we treat those that are most defenseless, and a child in the womb has no way to fight for him or herself. I think most of you know that the human heartbeat starts about 18 days after conception, and that a baby feels pain at about 8 weeks, and that through medical miracles, they can survive at about 20 weeks. And not all organs are functioning after 8 weeks. They have individual fingerprints at 9 weeks. And at 12 weeks, they can smile. I wonder about the constitutionality, quite frankly, colleagues, of this bill. And part of the reason I think that we need to remove abortion is because the religious exemption in here really, ultimately, in the insurance market, applies to one, let's call it, company. And I don't understand how constitutionally this legislature can set up a marketplace where one company can have substantial and significant advantage over their competitors. So I think there's a constitutional reason to move back to committee and adopt the -B11 amendments. There's obviously religious element to this, and I was thinking about that element, and Mother Teresa, who is one of my favorite people who has walked this earth, said this about the topic: "But I feel the greatest destroyer of peace today is abortion. because it is a war against the child, a direct killing of the innocent child. She went on, and I won't read it because, quite frankly, colleagues, it's pretty harsh. But she was speaking truth that you can't get away from. And some people have talked about the war on women and will say that people who vote against this, they don't care about women, they're creating a war on women. Not true. Not true. We all care. And I would say my position is consistent because I'm willing to defend the most vulnerable and innocent of women, and little boys too, when they can't defend themselves. But there's another war on women, and that's sex selection for abortion. It happens in a lot of countries, and it happens in our country too. And I think most of you know that in Oregon, we have no restrictions whatsoever on abortion. None. Every other state in the union has restrictions, and we don't. I get that some people will cheer that. I think that's tragic, that we aren't a state that is willing to have honest discussions about what abortion really is. And that's why we're having it today. And that's why I'm standing here today, putting things on the record. Because we can't just simply sweep this under the rug and say, well, you know, it's going to happen, so why, though, are we going to mandate, force taxpayers and people who are good people to pay for abortions? Some would say therapeutic abortions. In other words, those not medically necessary. And there's no reason, colleagues, for us to do this when we could have a bipartisan bill that nearly everyone in this chamber could support. And that's what we've done most of the session on controversial bills. So I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to do that one more time. And I know that, you know, people have their positions on abortion and that they're heartfelt, just like mine is. And I want to affirm life at every level. I've talked about that before. Because how we treat the most vulnerable says a lot about who we are. So whether you're young and vulnerable, or whether you're old and vulnerable, your life still means something. Your life means something Your life means something if you have a disability. Yet we're so quick to say, well, they have this malady or they have that malady. The one that comes to mind the most is Down syndrome. You know, would we look at a precious child who's born with Down syndrome, who's living today, and say, your life isn't worth anything? You should or could have been aborted. Would have made things easier. Really? Doesn't seem like compassion to me. We all have something wrong with us. It's just a matter of degrees, because nobody's perfect. And at some point, we're all going to have something wrong with us, and we're all going to be vulnerable. And that's why life is so important. We pursue a culture of death in this country, and it's pervasive. It's everywhere. It's in our movies, it's in our TV shows, it's in our video games, it's in our magazines. It's down the street. And what we're trying to do is affirm a culture of life. There's a lot of good reasons, colleagues, to have a bipartisan bill. You know, the souls of 50 million babies in our country cry out for justice. And I know God hears them. The question is, colleagues, will we hear their cries for justice and truly make this a bipartisan bill about women's health? Or will we simply be about forcing good people to fund what kills their souls? Colleagues, I urge your aye vote on this amendment to make it a bipartisan bill. Thank you.